From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes. Brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene. And Wally, we're weaving our way through April, and as usual, plenty going on here in the Twin Towns when it comes to sports. The Minnesota Twins limping out of the starting blocks in one of their worst starts in history.
Second worst ever through 22 games.
Yeah, not good.
No.
The 91 team that won a title started slow. Is that looking at the glass being too half full?
Wow. Well, boy, you are
I just thought I'd toss it out there because Twins fans, they really have been a pincushion all season. I mean, what's to be positive about it? They've just been getting poked and poked by watching this team play.
Well, our guest today was on that 91 team.
He was.
So we'll ask him and see what he says. See if there was positivity despite a slow start back in 1991. But with a slow start, you start pointing fingers, right? So where do you point the finger? Is it upper management for not going out and adding pieces? Is it Rocco? Is Rocco on the hot seat? Should Rocco be fired? I mean, you're starting to hear those rumblings. If this was New York or L.A. or Chicago, you'd be hearing this continuously. But this is Minnesota, where Tom Kelly decided his own fate, right? Because he won those 2 world titles. He could do what he wanted.
Yeah, he had a lifetime pass.
Yeah. Did he? I believe he lost more games than he won as a manager. Okay. So that having been said, Rocco's won, 3 division titles in his 6 previous seasons. This is season number 7. I don't know. I mean, he's been fairly successful, but they bottomed out last year. They were a playoff team the year before. They finally broke the playoff losing streak, but the year before that, they were terrible, if you recall.
Yeah, that drumbeat is going to get louder unless this team starts to win a lot of games and move closer to the top of the AL Central instead of being down there near the bottom with the pale
Chicago
White Sox. My goodness.
They're dreadful.
Anytime you're mentioned in the same sentence with the White Sox, that means things are not going very well for you. I would say this about Rocco.
Yes.
The problem is bigger than Rocco. I agree. I think he's just the puppet they have in place to run a system that I've never liked. It's too computer dependent. They rely too much on analytics. It's too robotic. It's a mix and match lineup every night. You go to the ballpark, you don't know who's going to bat leadoff. You don't know who's going to be in left field. There's just no continuity to it. Too many guys get on the IR, and some of that's legitimate, but some of it isn't. You got to grind through some injuries. You got to be a tough guy. You got to play old school baseball. So I'll go above him to Derek Falvey, and then above him to the ownership, the Polacks.
Right.
Because how many times have I said on these airwaves that at the end of the 2023 season, when they lost to the Houston Astros in the ALDS and they had beaten Toronto to get there, snapping that long playoff drought, there was momentum built up. There was a buzz going into 2024, and the Twins basically flushed it down the drain when ownership said we're going to pare down payroll. They weren't going to add any pieces, and that's such a turnoff for your fan base. So I think it's an organizational situation. I think the cancer has spread through the entire organization. But the last time I checked, no owner's ever said, I'm firing myself. That's never happened, right?
No.
And so then it goes down to your GM or your head coach. Sometimes both. I mean, look at the Denver Nuggets.
Well, yeah, but actually there's some bad news for the Twins beyond that. The Detroit Pistons, they were on their way to potentially breaking the Twins' record. They had lost 15 straight playoff games, but they beat Karl Anthony Towns and the Knicks a little earlier this week. So, Twins, you're still all alone at the top with, what did they lose, 18 or 19 in a row before they finally broke that thing? Look, I've never been a huge Rocco fan, the way he manages the club, the way he manages the lineups, as you suggested, so tied to the computer and the analytics. But again, I think a lot of that comes from up top. That's why Paul Molitor got out of it or was shown the door, because he did not adhere to that.
It's the organization, it's the culture,
absolutely,
it's the mindset, because there are other teams in the division, the AL Central, your Cleveland Guardians. Now, granted, they don't spend a penny either. I mean, they wave the white flag in July if they're in first place. They get rid of guys. But the way they play ball, I like the way they play ball.
That's true.
Stephen Kwan and that group, Jose Ramirez. Certainly Kansas City has a lot of grinders. And let's use the extreme example, the LA Dodgers, the World Series champs. And yeah, of course, they have all the pieces in place, the payroll, the development, the organization, the structure, Shohei. But those guys play, and they play hard, and there's a system. And when you go to the ballpark, you know who you're going to see.
Well, they play every day, and that's the key. And, injuries have played a part of it for the Twins, but you're right, man. They don't write the same lineup every day, and it's hard. As a fan, it's hard to get used to it, and I guess as a manager, I'm not sure what I would do. All right, we're going to talk some more Minnesota Twins baseball with Al Newman, who was a champion on those World Series teams in 87 and 91.
All right, we are 10K takes. Your Twins ticket.
When you see somebody who's a great skater, you can see in their individual rhythm. My name is Christian Grunna. I am owner, head coach, operator, main instructor for Grunna Power Skating. We had a history of not just speed skating, but auto racing in our family, so we're always interested in being fast. I want every player that comes my way to develop their skills, but also grow confidence in themselves as a human being.
In Lakeville, Minnesota, dozens of meeting venues are ready to host your next corporate event, banquet, and holiday party. Lakeville has unique conference facilities, a variety of hotels, an abundance of team-building options, and dining that are sure to impress. For suggestions that suit your needs, please call the Lakeville Convention and Visitors Bureau at 952-469-2020 or go to visitlakeville.org. Lakeville, we mean business.
Seeing clearly matters. Being seen matters more. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
And we are Minnesota Scores 10,000 takes. And boy, I got about 9,000 takes on the Twins lately. The way things
we
have
don't
gone
have
for
enough
them.
time.
Yeah, particularly on the road. But they're home all week this week. White Sox, Angels. They need to get things fixed. And let's bring in our guy, Al Newman, the former Minnesota Twin, world champion in 87 and 91. All right, Al. They need to fix a lot of stuff. What's at the top of the list as far as you're concerned?
Well, number one on the list for me is the new hitting coach has got to be feeling a little bit of heat right now with the team offensively ranked 26th, 27th in every category. That's not how he wanted to get off. I'm sure he wanted a better start. Spring training might have fooled them a little bit, but the offense has definitely got to pick it up a bit.
Al, let's go back to 1991, that World Series team you were on. Of course, you played on both of them. That was a slow-starting Twins team. I believe you were last place the year before. Was there any panic early on when the record was similar to what the Twins are now? Or how did you guys keep the faith?
Well, we had the big guy, Jack Morse, was the major acquisition for the 91 team. We had a young Tapani and Erickson and David West and Mark Guthrie, who had gotten a little, got their feet wet in 1990 when we were a last place team. But I can honestly tell you, it didn't feel like a last place team. It wasn't like we were a laughing stock. It was just a very competitive division. You had the Athletics who were still at the top of the heap. But I tell you, the Twins, this year just feels different. Obviously the team's up for sale. There's a lot of instability, people are already calling for Rocco's head and things like that. Things that just don't happen in Twins territory very often, if at all.
The $37 million contract that Carlos Correa is getting paid, do you see them trying to unload him before the trade deadline? I mean, they got to find somebody who's willing to pick that thing up. That's a lot of cake. I think he's like the 5th or 6th highest paid player in baseball, according to a stat I saw the other day. But do you see them moving him if they don't get into contention here by, let's say, the end of June?
Well, he's got to start to perform a lot better than he has been. Yes, maybe he's been on the field, but as far as the batting average and production is concerned, he's not really doing much at this point of the season. But yes, I definitely think that they unload. Twins will have to do something that they rarely ever do, and they might have to pay portion of that contract to be able to get rid of him. I think another guy that this is a rebuild. When you're selling the team, you're not going to bring assets to the ballpark. You're taking players away. So I honestly could see Buxton disappearing if he gets hot and he stays on the field. Because I think what happens is you get comfortable with your own players and you bring in a player like Correa who you think can get you over the hump. But if you're not ready in other areas, you're just trying to, polish up a 1970 Dodge Dart Swinger.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
There are other
Yes, that was my first
there are
car.
other analogies, and I know you're staying away from that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Al, let's talk about the ownership situation because the Twins were on the blocks. We thought the Pohlad family was going to possibly strike a deal with the Ishbia brothers out there in Arizona. That fell through. We've seen other teams go up for sale, like the LA Angels, Arte Moreno, but then he pulled back. What if the Pohlads just stand pat, they stay on this treadmill? I feel like Twins territory has checked out on the Pohlads, and I don't want to throw too much shade on them because they got 2 titles on their watch, but that's decades ago. I just feel like they need a change at the very top.
Well, that's big boy money that I know nothing about. But in my opinion with this, if the Pohlad, one thing that they did, they got a true value assessment of what the club is worth now. And maybe they can do their books or change the personnel with, Dave St. Peter stepping down and being more in a mentor role as Falvey takes his spot. But, as you said, and I kind of feel like Twins territory, it's checked out a little bit, like you just said. There's no positive momentum or anything that seems to be around the ball club from what I'm hearing from people that I, talk to.
A few minutes ago, you mentioned them, potentially taking away pieces with a potential sale on the horizon. Wouldn't you think that the Pohlads would want this thing to be as valuable as possible? I mean, if you're selling the team and they're in the race or they're playing well, or whatever the case may be, you would think that would be a little more enticing to a potential buyer.
Well, yes, but, most times when new owners come in, they clean house anyway. They bring their people. They bring their GMs. They bring their coaching staff. There's a changeover. So I would think that if I was the Pohlads in this situation here, when you should already be declaring a rebuild. I mean, to me, it is a rebuild, and it started last year, even though you added pieces and you were competitive. You really weren't bringing in, the big boys. You were just kind of toeing around the 50-50 mark. Are we in or are we out? But, the Twins, they count on playing and executing. And for me right now, they're just not putting enough guys on the field to get it done. And by that, I mean guys that have positions. I look at our lineup, and I say our because I was a Twin. But there's only 2 guys, if you exclude the catchers who platoon, that are going to play one position, Buxton and Correa. You got Jeffers and Vasquez. They're going to switch off just because they're catchers. But other than that, this interchangeable pieces everywhere, that means you're not good anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, really, and I'm a utility guy who played when guys got days off, but the other 6-7 guys were always in the lineup. Right. So there needs to be some lineup consistency, more like, the Cleveland Indians, the Kansas City Royals. You're going to see Witt You're definitely going to see Perez behind the plate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the other guys are there. So I think that's what the Twins need more than anything is just stability, lineup stability.
All right, let me ask you this question. I'll try to put some sort of a positive spin on things.
Sure.
The LA Angels are in the Twin Cities this weekend. Mike Trout and Byron Buxton, both elite talents, but they've battled injuries throughout their career. Trout's back. He's in right field. He appears to be thriving. Buxton's back so far. Needs to hike the average up a bit, but we've seen the warp speed on display on occasion. Who would you rather have healthy for 162, Trout or Buxton?
Ooh.
Trout, because he's got Ron Washington, he's got Torrey Hunter, and you said stay positive. I'm hoping Torrey doesn't come to Minnesota with the Anaheim with the LA Angels, because he is one on their staff and he's on their bench quite often. So I would go with the Mike Trout. He's got a bigger resume than Buxton. I don't even think that's a close comparison.
Yeah, you think, despite the fact that he has not been on the field much, is he Hall of Fame? He's certainly Hall of Fame material.
But I like to say that guys dominate their era, which Trout has done. To me, he's a Hall of Famer. You dominated your 8 to 10 year, that one decade right there. Man, come on, it shouldn't have took Fred McGriff that long to get into the Hall of Fame. The guy was, he dominated an era at his position. So there's quite a few guys that would get in if I was around. Delgado. Remember Carlos Delgado?
Yeah. Yeah, catcher turned first baseman, yeah. No,
sure.
He could hit the ball like nobody's business.
Yes, he could.
Quick yes or no then, by what you said about the Angels, Ron Washington, Torrey, as opposed to the Twins, better culture for the Angels and many other teams than the Twins? I don't like the culture the Twins have.
Well, I don't know their culture because they don't let me in the locker room. So I would just guess on personalities, though. Washington is a hoot, and his two base coaches are great guys. So we've got Tommy Watkins, and I think that's our big personality in that coaching room. So I'd go with the Angels.
All right, enough said. Thanks, Al.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Love
the
you guys.
insight
Thanks
as usual.
Have a good one, Al.
All right.
He's Al Newman. He won world championships with the Twins in 87 and 91. I don't think any of us sees him win it in 2025, but you never know. We're back with more after this timeout. Stay with us.
Great touchdown. Can I have a quick word with you? You are in jeopardy of failing my class. Change this or no more football.
If you want to be a great athlete, you have to study too.
I do want to play. I saw an ad on social media about reading out loud literacy program. Maybe they can help.
You did it.
When you read, you know. According to the 2021 to 2022 Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, just 31% of black students are proficient in reading, compared to 59% of white students. In addition, just 20% of black students are proficient in math, in comparison to 54% of their white counterparts. The more you read, the more you know. Reading out loud literacy can help you. Visit llcooljorg.com for more information. Reading Out Loud Literacy is sponsored by City of Minneapolis Community Trauma Response Fund.
Wally and Eric from 10,000 Takes here in the land of lakes. And if you want sports of all sorts, check us out. We cover all the bases, all the teams in the great state of Minnesota.
Vikings, Twins, Wild, Gophers, Timberwolves, Loons, you name it, we do it. Late night Saturday night on Fox 9 Plus and on the Fox local app.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earrings. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
We are Minnesota Scores 10,000 Takes, and neither of us spending time in Green Bay this week for the draft. But lots of people are. People are coming from all over the country, let alone the Midwest, to head to Titletown for the draft. It begs the question, for me anyway, as you look back at Viking draft choices over the years, what were some of your favorite picks? Obviously, something like Randy Moss, where he kind of slipped under the radar, not because of his talent, but because, he had skeletons in his closet and so on. Or a guy like John Randall, who wasn't drafted. That's why I have no idea why, any influence that I would have to go to a draft. I just have no desire to go to a draft. It's because it's just a lot of huffing and puffing.
It really is. And I've always said you can't grade a team's draft until 3 or 4 years after the fact.
Clearly.
And what's going to happen this weekend in Green Bay with all the, so-called NFL experts there, and then, of course, the fans who will flood social media and the cyberspace with their opinions, they'll give you these instant grades and an instant analysis, but it's just all opinion. You have no idea. Remember, Kurt Warner was not drafted. No. Tom Brady was in round 6. Terrell Davis was a very low pick. You brought up John Randall. Adam Thielen, undrafted.
That's
we
right.
can go on and on and on about guys who were picked really low. Brock Purdy, last pick in the draft.
The last pick. Mr. Irrelevant.
Yeah.
Mr. Irrelevant.
But if you're going to ask me about the Vikings, and I don't remember this draft, but I've done my purple history over the years, as you know, I think getting Alan Page that's a windfall. Ron Yeri, they were, if they weren't in the same draft, they were within a year of each other. They built that team with those guys. I still say Chuck Foreman in 1973 because once he came to the Twin Cities, the Vikings went to 3 more Super Bowls. But sleepers, guys that maybe you didn't think were going to do very well. Well, those are how you build your team. The bones of your team is those lower round picks, and the Vikings have had a few that have done very well, and they've had some that haven't been so well over the years.
Yeah, well, the new regime has done pretty well as far as going out and getting free agents. I'd say they're batting about 500 at best with draft picks so far. Okay, I mentioned Green Bay. We know that the draft was in Detroit last year. It was in Chicago back in 2015, I want to say. Do you see it coming to Minneapolis? Should it come to Minneapolis? Do we care if it comes to Minneapolis?
First of all, Minnesota, they're on an island in the NFC North.
That's true.
Every other team has now hosted it, with Green Bay being the most recent. Personally, I'm not a big draft guy, but I realize a lot of people are. I'm not going to throw shade on what is clearly a crown jewel NFL event.
People love it.
Let's cut to the chase. No more Super Bowls are coming here. Forget it.
Yeah.
So I think someday the NFL should give the Twin Cities the draft. I think they'd get close to 1 million people. I really do.
Probably would.
But who's leading the charge? Who's the point guard or the quarterback, if you will, for the Twin Cities? Like we used to have, trying to get Final Fours and other major sporting events here. So I don't know if we have anyone like that now, but I think the draft should go to these cities that can't get Super Bowls, like Green Bay, Pittsburgh next year, Cleveland, and they'll turn out, in throngs.
Yeah, they will, for sure. As long as they don't turn out in thongs. All right.
Depends who's wearing them.
Well, okay. All right, stay with us. Takes of the day, our favorite part of the show, coming up next.
Seeing clearly matters. Being seen matters more. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
When you see somebody who's a great skater, you can see their individual rhythm. My name is Christian Grunna. I'm owner, head coach, operator, main instructor for Grunna Power Skating. We had a history of not just speed skating, but auto racing in our family, so we're always interested in being fast. I want every player that comes my way to develop their skills, but also grow confidence in themselves as a human being.
In Lakeville, Minnesota, Minnesota, dozens of meeting venues are ready to host your next corporate event, banquet, and holiday party. Lakeville has unique conference facilities, a variety of hotels, an abundance of team-building options, and dining that are sure to impress. For suggestions that suit your needs, please call the Lakeville Convention and Visitors Bureau at 952-469-2020 or go to visitlakeville.org. Lakeville, we mean business.
Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see. Reading out loud, literacy will literally make sense of the things you see.
British A. Robinson, President and CEO of the Barbara Bush Foundation, stated, "America's low literacy crisis is largely ignored, historically underfunded and woefully under-researched, despite being one of the great solvable problems of our time. Learning to read is fun and essential." Reading Out Loud Literacy is sponsored by City of Minneapolis Community Trauma Response Fund.
10K takes on television as we wrap up yet another episode. Big shout out to the viewers in the Twin Ports, the Twin Cities, up and down that busy I-35 corridor. And they're going to soon learn what your mood is. Angry, sarcastic, demanding. What is it?
Well, I started looking into more NCAA stuff. And as you recall, we talked about just a week or two ago what Dawson Garcia got as a senior for the Minnesota Golden Gopher men's basketball team. He brought in about $400,000 out of the $500,000 that Ben Johnson had in NIL money to kind of distribute among his players. Well, apparently he likes that kind of cash because even though he has played 4+ seasons of college basketball, and I think he actually played 5. He was at North Carolina for a year, he's at Marquette for a year, and then 3 years with the Gophers, but I think he got a COVID year mixed in there. Ipso facto, he is going into the transfer portal, and then he'll have to get a waiver from the NCAA. You know, as much as they change the rules, as often as things are changing, as fluid as the situation is with college sports, why not? He might make, you know, as much or more money playing college basketball than he will as a pro because he is not guaranteed to get into the first round. He might not be a first-round pick, and if he's not, you're not guaranteed 3 years, and you're not guaranteed that money. So, heck, you might see Dawson Garcia playing college hoops again next season.
Wow. Well, good for Dawson. Way to manipulate the system. Let's see
Why
what
not?
the mood meter says. Sarcastic Sam. All right.
You never know.
All right, well, my take of the day, I'm just going to make a suggestion to the new owners of the Minnesota Timberwolves, Mark Laurie and Alex Rodriguez. You've got home playoff games on Friday night and Sunday afternoon against the Los Angeles Lakers as the NBA playoffs continue. I think you need to bring KG back into the house and get that thing rocking, because one thing we know, KG has stayed away from the Timberwolves because of the acrimony he's had with Glenn Taylor. But now that you're going to have new ownership, I think we're going to see KG get probably get the jersey up in the rafters, the banner, maybe a statue someday. Now, he went to the Hall of Fame as a Boston Celtic. Let's not forget that. But I think KG, deep down, is a soda guy, as he used to say. I think he still has a place in Orono. So get KG into the arena. Get it rocking for the Lakers, games 3 and 4. And on that note, we got to say goodbye.
Yes.
Thanks for tuning us in. We are 10,000 Takes, your sports ticket.